And welcome back. Our first conversation this morning is all about policing. We have with us in studio the Assistant Superintendent, Stacey Smith, and she's here to discuss with us a range of issues, including matters involving the department itself. Good morning, ASP Smith.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, Belize.
I feel like it's the first time we're having you on the couch with us since you kind of came into the spotlight as a new face of the police department where communicating with the media is concerned. So that being said, welcome to Open Your Eyes. I'm looking forward to this conversation. First things first.
Thank you for having me.
There's been a raft of incidents over the weekend, and I'm certain that while the commissioner will get into the details of that later this evening, perhaps a perspective from you on how you see this unfolding in the city and perhaps what the department is looking at in terms of being able to address these incidents of criminality.
Certainly, and thank you, first of all, thank you all for having me here. Certainly, the department is approaching this weekend's incident with great concern. I think the extent to which I wish to speak, because as I've indicated and as you've stated, the Commissioner will hold a press conference at 2:30 p.m. So the details of the department's approach will be revealed then insofar as it is necessary to be revealed. But what I can say is that along the line of the press briefing that was released yesterday, in terms of the public being cognizant and being more responsible in terms of the posts that they share, we know that some elements are paying attention to social media. There is this false pride or this gang pride, and when it is that there are comments from persons stoking the fire and things of that sort, it has the possibility of getting to a level that nobody stands to benefit from.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine that in the wake of all of this, the public and and our viewers that are watching right now, they have a lot more questions than they do answers. And I think that the power of social media, this is one of those incidents where we see it being used in a very negative light. The police department has been under a microscope lately, and we have been watching the interactions of the police with the general community and the communities that they are fit to serve. And I just kind of wanted to create that foundation for a conversation that we do want to have, because up until Wednesday, I believe, we've still been seeing this bad interaction with the police and the community. And it's not the first time, but for some reason this particular week we've just been seeing an event after an event after an event. And I think the comments and the questions that the public have are, what is being done about that?
Yes, the questions and the comments that the public have are very valid questions and comments. We are public officers, we are public servants. So service requires a certain level of discipline and conduct and professionalism, of course. Whilst it is that those are the events or the happenings that took the center stage for the department over the past week has also conducted numerous community policing efforts, and those were not incidents or matters that were publicized. So certainly, whilst it is that I do not want to dictate what goes on the media, what is of equal importance is that whenever information is being broadcasted, it's being broadcasted in a balanced way to show that not only are there officers who are rogue, because it will be immature of me or foolish of me to think that with an organization that stands at approximately 3,000 persons, there won't be officers who do not conduct themselves in the manner that is befitting of officers. Again, they are persons who are taken from society. So every ill that occurs in every sphere of society, there is a representation there in the department. Whilst we do training, the recruit training and continuous training in the hope of ridding persons who may come into the department with these type of character traits, there is only so much that can be done, and certainly whatever disciplinary actions that we can take within the confines of the law is what dictates what goes after that.
you're right in saying that, Stacey, because in every organization, certain things are endemic. You can't have an organization with all stellar, squeaky clean people, right? Because you're, as you mentioned, bringing in people from various pockets of society, and they come with their own mindset, their culture different, and so on. I, for one, I'm very happy and content when I see a lot of police officers on patrol in my neighborhood. I know where I come from, and I know that that is necessary to keep things at bay, right? Other people would feel like because they're seeing a lot of young police officers on the streets, they feel perhaps a sense of, I wouldn't say confinement, but if they're probably thinking, man, I can't move around as freely as I ordinarily would because
there's
a lot of policemen there and stuff. My question to you, Stacey, is when an officer swears an oath, right, to protect and serve, not only is that individual looking out for his or her personal well-being, but the mandate is to look after the community's well-being, right? How do you guys find that balance? Where you might face a situation where you have to consider your own safety, but you have to interact with an individual or a group of individuals in a hostile situation without it escalating to unnecessary use of force and what have you.
The hope is certainly that when officers are confronted with situations of that sort, the training that they go through will kick in, and that will dictate how it is that they approach the situation. Certainly, there has been much emphasis placed from as far back as I was a police officer. I'm still a police officer, but as far back from when I enlisted in 2007 of community policing, being respectful, being professional, showing you the way you should approach persons when they're on the street and you're desirous of conducting a search on them because you have reasonable suspicion. So yes, police officers are human, and it is right that they are placed under microscope because with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
But certainly officers are required and expected to continue to improve themselves, whether it is officially through official means in terms of formal training that are had, or the officer can take it upon themselves to ensure that they are always equipped. It is always important to de-escalate the situation. That is the first course of action that is taken. It is only when de-escalation proves to be futile, then certainly you'll have to increase whatever approach you have to get the situation under control and preventing it from escalating even much wider, especially when it is that we're in public places and persons are around. The quicker you can get a situation under control, professionally of course, the better it is, or less the likelihood is of other persons intervening and making it an even more difficult situation for police to handle.
Here's a scenario then. A majority of the crimes that are committed in Belize City are gang related. One could argue that it ties back to some group of people who perhaps are at odds with another group based on the geography and so on and so forth, right? But you have organizations like the Leadership Intervention Unit that is tasked with being able to interact with these young men with a view to change their behavior and their outlook on life and so on. That's perhaps a softer approach in terms of conflict resolution and what have you. But then push come to shove, the police still have to wield the big stick, right? Because you're dealing with people who in some cases are bent on criminality. No matter how much you try to talk to them, you try make them see the light, so to speak, they're up on their own thing. Now, the question is, where does the department strike that balance between being able to meaningfully engage with certain pockets of society versus being able to come down heavy with the hammer?
Yes, certainly the department has always taken the position of having a dualist approach, a multifaceted approach. On one end of the spectrum is the community policing and the leadership intervention unit, and on the other end of the spectrum are the more operational arm of the unit, of the department, sorry. The carrot and stick approach is a phrase that is oftentimes said when it comes to handling issues of this nature. But what we need to appreciate is that for persons to avail themselves to the carrot, they must first of all love themselves, respect themselves, have regard for the safety of others and those they love. If it is that there continues to be a state of affairs where persons feel as if though the incentive to be bad is better and there is nothing that is there to guide them into going the positive route that is desirous, they will continue to do what it is. So going back to your questions, the police department has, since time immemorial, at least since I've been in there, placed as much emphasis as it has on, or as it can, on community policing efforts on one end and operational efforts on the other. And it is the marry of those two that certainly will create the state of affairs that is desirous to all Belizeans. But insofar as the societal norms continue to respect or to rate, to use the common parlance, persons who engage in criminality, their desire to go to that positive end will continue to diminish. So certainly it is a need for all persons in society, whether it's public servants, private servants, the citizens. I jokingly say it's almost like persons innately born with this sense of distrust for police officers, because I grew up in a home where I wasn't accustomed, or I and my siblings were not accustomed to seeing police officers coming in our home. We were not accustomed to hearing the musics that condemn police officers. But I have a younger sister who is 10 years my junior, and we live at the back of the yard, and she would have this tendency to go to the gate and just look at passers-by. And whenever, and she was 3 or 4 at this time, and whenever you would see her run to the back of the yard, inside the house and hide, best believe if you go to the gate and take a check, you'll see it is that a police officer passed by. So as I said, it is not that we grew up in a circumstance that created an animosity towards police, but I don't know if it's something
that gradually grew. Yeah.
I literally don't know where it came from, because not once has, you know, during my time growing up, police come to her house. But this little girl, you know, she was so fearful of police. So, and this is one of the reasons why when I was a community policing officer, when I would walk on the street or go to school and persons would say, see the police there, we'll make the police beat up here, make the police lock up here. I, first and foremost, you know, I know it is that there is some legitimacy or some purpose to that mother or father, as the case may be, calling police because there's a situation that they believe they want that show of force. But I also know that it is already conditioning children from a very young age that, you know, police are this big bad wolf, which we are not.
I have a question when it comes to this particular conversation, because we were discussing it last week Friday on the show, where a lot of the times you all have to be transported to do your community service. So a lot of the communities that you serve, you are not necessarily from there. There is a lot of relocating that happens amongst the police department, which I don't know how often community members consider that the police officer that is patrolling is not from there. Or maybe they know, maybe they don't know. But what sort of training do you all receive to kind of put yourself into a mindset, into a community, and into a space that you're not familiar with? How do you familiarize yourself with the community? How are you able to get that trust and that rapport with the community that kind of prevents this sort of mentality from taking place?
Yes, it certainly, it is a factor of consideration. It is a very important point that you address. And given that Belize is so diverse, both in culture and similarly in socio-economic status, there is indeed a need for police officers, and the department has long since recognized that, and this is the reason why there are community policing efforts. When a police officer takes up posts in a place that they're not familiar with, one of the first course of action is to go into the community, introduce themselves, and undertake meet and greet. That is something that is done weekly by police officers all over the country, wherein a day is set aside for officers, both operational officers, community policing officers, CIB officers, to identify a specific neighborhood and go into that neighborhood and speaking with everyone that is there, in as much as persons are open to speaking to police officers.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what you were saying prior to April's question with the manner in which the rest of society interacts with police. When you come from a neighborhood or a community where growing up, most of the engagement that you see between officers and the civilian public is brute force engagement and what have you, you naturally grow up with this hatred towards the police.
Fair.
So while in my case, I could respect the work of the police department in terms of maintaining law and order, the approach is oftentimes questionable, right? Because in some cases, it doesn't matter how well trained an officer is. If he or she is dealing with their own challenges in their personal lives, come into a situation where they're required to act in a certain manner that diffuses a situation or arrests a situation, if it were, but they're overwhelmed with their own personal thing when they deal with home, you cannot expect, or it's difficult for one to expect reasonably that the officer will set aside his or her own issues and address the one that is in front of them. And oftentimes it creates a situation where they just come in big stick, whap whap, throw it in the back of the vehicle and go. When people see that, even though they're not directly engaged with what they're seeing, maybe like you said, the 10-year-old that's just speaking and sees it, that creates a certain fear, that creates a certain antipathy, that's the word, where I know I got nothing to do with them. So that reflects, excuse me, that reflects in music, that reflects in behavior. When you go to school as a child and they ask you, where you do this weekend, and you say, well, I said police beat up so and so back at the yard, you're sharing that informally, and then everybody gravitate towards that particular position. It's us against them, basically. The challenge is for you guys to break that mold, because yes, there are great police officers, right? And they will approach, introduce themselves, and become a member of the community that they serve.
Yeah.
So to answer April's question, you do have police officers who come into an environment and introduce themselves and go about it the proper way. Make sure they know everybody in the neighborhood, the good people, the bad people, and the in between, right? And so the community then accepts these people. But when you come in from the onset and you draw a certain line in the sand, that this is where I stand and this is where you stand, when you have tension, it's difficult to break that tension. I want to get your input on that.
Yes, certainly it would be a disservice to any police officer. Any police officer would be doing a disservice to themselves, sorry, to think that they are able to police a community without that community's involvement. It is impossible. So certainly such an approach is one that is not encouraged, and one that certainly the department takes a position in eradicating. When it comes to what you've stated, that what is known or what is seen by persons are police officers engaging in physicality against citizens, I am sure that citizens have seen other citizens engaging in conduct of criminality and they don't call it out. I am not saying that because you don't call out a civilian, you should not call out the police. We want you to call out the police and continue to call out the police so that we can take the necessary disciplinary actions to get those police officers who have forgotten their oath outside of the department. But similarly, we have to be realistic when it comes to if it is that we truly want a society that is going in the right direction in terms of pointing out wrongs that not only exist in public service and by the public servants, but also by civilians.
I think that the jadedness of the community's approach to policing in this manner and this light comes at the heel that we don't necessarily see the accountability that takes place. We hear these issues that happen, we hear statements from the Commissioner of the Police and the Police Department, but we don't often see what happens to that police officer after something horrible like that happens.
Great point, and I guess the takeaway for that, or the approach to be taken now, is for us to publicize, you know, how many officers have been convicted of disciplinary infractions, how many of them have been dismissed. It's not something that we necessarily publicize, but certainly going forward, maybe the discussion can be to publicize that information so the department is aware, that the public, is aware that we are taking actions against officers who we believe have conducted themselves in ways that are not beneficial to the institution and to the country.
What kind of systems, if any, or mechanisms are in place for citizens to feel safe enough to come in and make these reports and against these sort of brutalities?
Well, there is the professional standards branch. There are professional standard branch officers all over the country. These are formerly known as the internal affairs. That is the area of the department that you can go to and make your complaint, and we encourage everyone to do so. The commissioner also meets on every other Wednesdays with members of the public at Raccoon Street Police Station. All you can do is make an appointment, and you get to see the commissioner if it is that you believe you've stated something to the PSB and nothing has been done. There exists in our policies and procedure manual a direct route, or a direct way in which we should handle reports or complaints against police officers. And we also have disciplinary procedure rules in terms of when it is that a police officer is implicated in any incident, whether internally or something that has nothing to do with the department, but because you are a police officer and you're expected to conduct yourself in such a way, it is something that the department finds important to see if it is that it conflicts with your ability to do your job as a police officer. So I certainly encourage persons to speak out. There is never a desire on the department's part to keep people away who want to complain. We want persons to come in and complain and stay the process. Don't, when it is that a disciplinary action has started, you decide you no longer want anything in the matter, and we are left, because even though they're a police officer and it's a disciplinary procedure, they are also entitled to natural justice and due process and all of that. And there is only so far that we can go, even if it is that all indications are that the police officer has committed themselves. But if persons don't want to come in and be a part of those disciplinary tribunal, and there is not additional corroborative evidence independent of that person that enables a tribunal to come to a position, then nothing will happen. We will have the type of society, the type of department that we want, if it is that we take this cynical approach that even if I say something, nothing will happen. Things have happened. Officers have been dismissed. So I encourage persons who feel aggrieved to go ahead and make the necessary reports. And if it is that they feel as they've made reports and nothing has happened, we have seen time and time again that persons have availed themselves to the media. The media is a very powerful tool. I myself have seen how powerful the media is. Most recently, and I need to say this, with the Kikaka incident, not that I want to delve into the specifics, because as I would have stated, Commissioner Rosado will do so in this afternoon's press conference. But I will say this, I really want to say this. My integrity has been put into question because of the way a media house reported a certain incident, a Kikaka incident. You would know that on the Monday, it was very early in the morning. The video clips were not surfaced by that time. I had no knowledge of it, absolutely no knowledge. But when the portion that was aired subsequent the other day, what is being played behind me saying I have no knowledge is the police officer with the knife in his hand, which was not information that was not known, which was information that was not known to me. I was honestly, you know, conveying and best believe that my first course of action is personal integrity, honesty when it is that I do my job as a police officer.
That's a more than fair position.
Yes, indeed.
I think sometimes in the media, as practitioners, we err in judgment in terms of how we put together or how we share information, right? And if that were one of the cases that they did you hard in terms of how they edited it or whatever, then you're right. You have to stand on your integrity as an individual and as an officer, right? Fair enough. But my subsequent question here, Stacey, is this, right? So you have a situation where people in Kikaka, in light of what happened last Monday with the deadly stabbing, you have people now who are galvanizing and saying, well, you know what? Here's an issue where the police perhaps either used excessive force or unnecessary force if that was the case. You have an issue where a young man is detained and arrested, a whole golf cart situation, and an officer just openly smacks the individual. So I don't mean to make that up. We ran the video. It speaks for itself.
Yes.
Right? Is that a situation where, in your perhaps your opinion, could have been dealt with otherwise than resorting to that unnecessary force?
Since it will be a matter that will be under internal investigation, I do not want to prejudice that or say anything. But certainly, the fact that the police department has since transferred those persons, I think is an indication, and has, as I stated, initiated disciplinary action, shows that from the face of it alone, it is conduct that is not countenance. That particular incident happened probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, from what I learned. And the police, the professional standard branch, had already investigated that. What I was advised is that the person was not interested in criminal action, but was interested in disciplinary action, and that was what had transpired. But certainly, I will always want to employ, and these police officers will tell you, I am a presenter. And by presenter, I mean like a prosecutor in the policing world in terms of when it comes to dealing with disciplinary actions. And there are many other presenters such as myself and officers just such as myself who will never countenance conduct that only serves to gain more hate, more animosity towards us when it is that we are doing our job.
Well, we have a lot more to discuss, but we do have to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we have more with ASP Stacey Smith. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Here's how to access your contribution history on the My Social Security portal. First, go to your browser and type ssbportal.org.bz. Enter your email and password, then click Log In. Once logged in, you'll see your full portal account on the screen. On the left-hand side, you'll notice a drop-down menu for added features. Click on History. Choose Contributions. Read the disclaimer, then click Continue. You'll now see a full window displaying your contribution history. In the table, each row represents a different year. For example, let's look at the year 2024. Click on the row and a detailed breakdown will appear. This breakdown includes your employer's name, your earnings for each month and week, contribution type, the amounts paid, and that's how you can explore the new contribution feature on the My Social Security portal. It's quick, easy, and keeps your social security information right at your fingertips. Create your account today.
In our world that's always changing, one thing stays the same.
Our promise as Smart Belize to keep you connected.
Connected to the moments, the people, and the future that matter most.
With every new tower, our service upgrades, and every new smile, we're keeping our promise in building more than a network.
We're building a future, a family as Smart Belize. From Punta Gorda to Corozal, we are here not just as a network, but as your partner in progress.
We have grown significantly over the past 20 years, and we just keep growing. Thank you for placing your trust in us. We remain dedicated to providing meaningful connections that bring value in every way that matters to you. We continue to bring people together.
Welcome back. We are here with ASP Stacy Smith, and we have been discussing all matters regarding the current issues within the Belize Police Department. But we wanted to take it a different direction in terms of the way that you're training your officers and what are the do's and don'ts in terms of stop, searches, and arrests. So we dive into that conversation.
Okay. When it comes to a police officer being on duty and making certain observation that he believes raises the reasonable suspicion that warrants a search, the police officer certainly is to approach that person in a respectable manner. If the circumstance is such that enables him to identify himself, he does so. And he informs the person that he has reasonable suspicion of X and Y, and he desires to conduct a search on that person. Having conducted a search on that person, it would be good to thank the person for their cooperation and disperse them from the location if it is that is something like that. When it comes to the detention of an individual, we know that when a person is arrested within the first 24 hours or as soon as you are able to, you inform that person of the reason of their arrest, but in no case no later than 24 hours. It should not be that a person is in police's detention for in excess of 24 hours and they don't know what they are there for. Not because you are entitled to that 24 hours, that means you will wait until 23 and a half hours when you already know that you will inform them. You inform them right away. If it is that the person is charged, you go through the process, and from there in detention, you have to inform them of their rights, that they have the right to speak to a lawyer, speak to a friend, speak to somebody to convey the fact that they are arrested or they are in detention, and for the legal aspect of that person's detention to take place. And they're also issued with an acknowledgement form. This acknowledgement form outlines the person's rights, and all of these things certainly has to be done in a language that the person understands. When it is that the police officers are deciding to charge or have charge, if it is that it is for offenses which are usually the minor summary offenses that they can get bail, give them bail. Police station, cell block, as comfortable as we want to make it to be and as humane as we want to make it to be, it is nothing compared to somebody's home. You know, so certainly, and there's a burden on the state to provide food and security the more you have them there. So if it's a bailable offense, grant them station bail. When it is, I know there's much discussion about the 48 hours in police detention. Yes, it's 48 hours. That 48 hours is to enable officers to conduct unimpeded investigation as it relates to that person. But if it is that hour 3, 4, 5 into that person's detention, you have learned that, hey, I may have detained a person who may have some nexus to what happened, but is not the person who I have interest in charging, you release them. You release them right away. And this is something that we have made memos into the department, that even though persons can be detained for up to 48 hours without charge, that doesn't mean that you will expel or utilize the entirety of the 48 hours. The lawfulness of detention is assessed on an hour by hour basis or minute by minute basis. The time that it has become very apparent to that police officer that he or she will not be able to charge that person, you release them. And having released them, please not recycle them, right? That is something that we have made clear.
There have been cases where they release and grab your back and do the same party it again.
And indeed, we are not shying away from that as a department. It has been done. As with everything in society, people seek to find loopholes, you know. So that is something that we have made into memo and directed into the department, that once 48 hours has elapsed, or even before you release that person, why 1 hour later, 5 minutes later, you will detain that person? Certainly, unless you can justify that just after 5 minutes I received this very significant and important and, you know, the linchpin of information to justify picking up that person right after that. When a person is charged and taken before the court, that process is called arraignment. And at arraignment, the person will be read their charges in a language that they understand, and just the basics of it, and ask what they plead, if it is that there's somebody who is fit to plead. And subsequent to that, the issue of bail is something that is addressed. Speaking of bail, I know one of the most recent incidents that gained a lot of traction in the department, in the media, is the incident that happened on the south side of Belize with the young man, Mr. Lam, who had been convicted prior for sexual offenses. You know, the police officer in that instance, and even in previous times, would have been saying, you know what, because at the lower court, Belize has a very unique thing in that police officers are prosecutors. In other part of the world, it's not police officers, right? And Sergeant Smith, who would have dealt with him on the previous occasion and would have made submissions for the penalty to have been greater. And this is another misconception. People believe it's police that implements whatever sentencing. The police, they're stupid, they only get a man 11 months, a kind of thing that police have absolutely nothing to do with that. We conduct the prosecution and we make our submissions, and it is within the remit of the court to decide what they deem is just under the circumstances. But
there's this conversation, Don, we'll wrap up shortly. There's this conversation where the legal fraternity insists that bail is a right. It's not a privilege, right? Depending on the type of crime that is committed. Now I could understand if you commit murder, you have to look for a bail different than if you commit an offense that is bailable. It becomes your right to be able to come out on bond.
Yes, and certainly they are not wrong in holding that position. Certainly restricting someone's liberty should only be pursuant to a conviction or where there is very compelling reasons to do so. Now, in a case where someone has not been convicted, have just been arraigned, if it is that what time has proven is that every time this person is out on bail, the person has the propensity to commit again and crimes of the like manner. So though bail is a right, the state and the court knows that it has a duty to protect that person in terms of maybe they may be the subject of retaliatory violence because of what they've done. And the public, if it is that these are persons who continue to re-offend. You know, because ultimately what the court considers is the likelihood of that person turning up for trial. But there are other considerations that are borne in mind, and it is for the prosecutors and the defense attorneys to put that to the court and for the court to make their decision.
Well, ASP Stacey Smith, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And of course, there will be a lot more conversations about this in the press briefing this afternoon with the Commissioner of Police, Dr. Rosado. But thank you so much for your time and for being here with us.
And thank you so very much for having me.
All right, we are going to take another short break, and we'll be switching gears kind of around the same conversation. We'll be having representatives from UNICEF, and we'll be asking them, why is there a different approach to justice when it comes to juveniles? You don't want to miss that conversation? We'll be right back.